This is the Tabernacle Podcast with your hosts for the day, me, Martin Rizzi, and Mr. Isaac Riddle. Isaac, what's going on, man?
Brother, I can tell you what's going on. So I made a life change pretty recently. I used to have a beard.
Yeah.
And I fully committed to just like the nasty stash. I don't know what inspired it, but I think it's here to stay.
I feel for your wife. Genuine.
She's all about it.
It's interesting to me because the people that are not watching this, that are just listening, are missing out so much on what this thing looks like.
Listen, it's all good.
Just in case you don't know, they left two short, bald pastors to do this interview, and one of them does have a mustache right now. And if you're not watching this, you are missing out. So some props to our YouTube channel.
Listen, one of them could have a mustache. You just need to fully commit.
It's going to happen. My wife hates the idea, but I just had a couple that I am marrying in a few weeks ask for it. So, it's part of the business now. So we're there.
That's the coolest wedding gig in the world.
It really is. They're maybe the coolest couple. I keep shouting them out on here just because they are maybe one of the most amazing couples I've ever met. I'm excited for that. But all the fun and games aside, we get a really cool opportunity today to interview somebody that I got to meet via phone a while back in a really awkward conversation. But you got to have a much better introduction with, because you've actually been able to grow some of this partnership today. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Rachel, when I met you, it wasn't bad news. So
and mine
up there.
Mine was definitely bad news, but we'll give a little piece of the parts of the story. Today we get to interview Rachel Reinink. Did I get that right?
You sure did.
Reinink, sweet. There's the first win for the day. She is the executive director of Love in the Name of Christ over in Cadillac. They have been a partner ministry of the Tabernacle for some time, but recently we have you're fairly recently new. Like the person that I met was not you, and that was some time, and then I got to know an interim fella for a little while. But you've taken over, and how long have you been there now?
I've been at Love Inc. as a director for just shy of 2 years.
Just shy of 2 years. So, man, it has gone by fast.
It does.
I thought you were new, but it's like, no, you've been doing this for a minute.
Yeah, I still feel new in a lot of aspects, but yeah, I've been there a while.
It takes a little while to figure those types of things out, but
Yes.
yeah, we're excited to get to know you, to hear about Love Inc., this partnership. And as I kind of alluded to, my first phone call with you was, hey, things have been really rough through this whole quarantine, and we're in a place financially where we need to step away for a short time. And I was immediately blown away by your response. You're like, hey, I've been here for like 10 minutes, and yeah, we're good. We understand. This is how partnership works. I actually learned a lot in that conversation because I had 4 more of them to make. So glad that yours was the first, because you were the grace that you showed us, and the devotion to a partnership of saying, hey, this isn't just about you sending a check or you supporting. Take the time you need. We're in it with you, whether it's good or whether it's bad. I was like, this kind of feels like a marriage. Like we can do this.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. And then I introduced you to Isaac, and he got to be the good guy, and we are back in full financial partnership.
Yes.
All is well, right?
Yes, all is well.
Awesome.
Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord.
Good. Well, before we jump into what Love in the Name of Christ does, how it connects, because I think that a lot of our people want to know who these folks are, I'm more interested in who you are, like how you ended up in this role. We often do change life stories. We might not take the whole hour and a half for that, but if we do, we'll come back and we'll discuss Love Inc. another time. But tell us a little bit about you. Where you come from? How'd you get where you're at?
So I grew up in a little town called McBain, Michigan, which is about 13 miles east of Cadillac. And I followed my husband, his name is Gavin, to Grand Rapids because he went to Grand Valley State for college. I, at the time, was not in college. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life, and I wasn't going to waste a bunch of money just to figure it out. So I just had a full-time job at Fifth Third Bank.
Okay.
And I transferred to a Fifth Third in Jenison in the greater Grand Rapids area, and I worked there for a long time. We ended up getting married and having a few babies. And in that whole process, which is a story in and of itself, I was on bed rest for almost the entire pregnancy for my second child, and so I lost my job at the bank. And then I was a stay-at-home mom for several years. And we were heavily involved in our church in Greater Grand Rapids, in Byron Center, actually. And I just really felt this call to be in ministry. So I ended up going to Grace Bible College, now Grace University, and got my degree in leadership and ministry. And then I went to seminary at Western Theological Seminary and got my degree in practical theology. And then I was a church planter for several years. I helped plant a number of churches through that large church network. And it was the best time of my life.
Yeah.
Truly.
Okay. Wow. There's
That was
a lot there.
lot in one statement.
Yeah,
we
so-
could unpack all of that today.
Your
Yeah.
ability to be concise far exceeds both Isaac and I's. Not to mention your education is exciting to me because I've not gotten to do most of those things. So it's cool to hear. But yeah, just a couple of things. So you went from bed rest to, hey, let's find the most stressful profession within ministry and,
Right.
and plant
We
churches.
do that.
Yeah. And your kids are not babies right now. So I don't know if our watchers are out there going, wait, how old are your kids? Like how long have you been doing this? But what's that time frame look like in that period?
Yeah, so I started going to school when our oldest daughter was 2.
Okay.
And so I've been doing it ever since.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and now we have 3 kids. So, yeah,
And that's a really busy time, like
it was.
to have kids and go to school and then
And then
plant
get a
church.
job. Yeah, planting a church. Yeah, it was bananas.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
Let's back up for just a second here,
Okay.
too. You had mentioned that there was a point in your faith journey where there was a clear call to ministry. That looks different for every person that's in ministry. Can you speak to that a little bit? What did that call look like? Where did it come from? What did God use to kind of pull you into this place?
So, and I was not prepared.
That's okay. That's okay.
Way to go, Isaac.
Uh-huh.
Way to go.
We're going to go there.
Yeah.
It's all right.
So, in 2011, I miscarried our son at 14 weeks. And I spiraled into this dark, dark depression. And there were some ladies in our church that would come over almost every day to my home, and one of them washed my feet. And it was so beautiful. And that was the moment, like this aha moment, a kairos moment, like the Holy Spirit was very much just there and said, I need you to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, well, I don't know what that looks like, but I feel as though this is my healing journey and this is what I'm called to do. To back up a little bit, in the 7th grade, I gave a sermon as my speech for speech class.
Yeah.
So it felt natural.
It's like I've been here.
I've been here before. So then I started that process of what would it look like? Where should I go? What should I do? And the more I got into my classes and the program, I realized I really enjoy 2 things. Number 1, starting new things. I love it. And I really love preaching the good news of Jesus.
Yeah.
So, that's where it all landed. And then that was my journey.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Wonderful.
Well,
Thanks for your vulnerability there too.
Of course.
I know we're going there.
Yeah.
But just
Yeah.
appreciate your heart in that.
Thank you.
through the tough stuff isn't always easy, but it is remarkable just to hear the clarity of the call.
Yeah.
I think I find in church world, still probably the newest in the room to church world still, that sometimes it's really tough. We either really over-spiritualize the idea of a call or we undersell the reality of a call.
Yeah.
And when God's clear with us and we're obedient, amazing things happen, but that doesn't mean that it's not through in the midst of difficult.
For sure.
I'd also like to point out that you are a rare breed that I am 1,000% celebrating because church planting, whew, that's a work.
Yeah.
That is a work
You
and a
hustle.
joy.
Yeah.
But to see passion there is such an exciting thing.
Yeah.
Will you tell us a little bit about that? So, I mean, obviously it's a story in itself, but what leads you into this place of, hey, I'm going to plant churches? Who's behind you? Are you just out deciding you're doing it? I'm guessing your husband and the family are with you, but is there anybody else alongside?
Oh my goodness, yeah, there were a lot of people along the journey. So we were part of a church in Byron Center called South Harbor Church, and it's part of the Reformed Church in America. And they were about multiplication, missional movements, and just creating spaces within our communities that allowed people to know who Jesus is. And so that was the culture that was set right out of the gate. That was our first church plant. Actually, they were having block parties, and one of them ended up in our backyard while we were gone on vacation.
Right on.
They went to the wrong house.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they were using our yard. They just, I don't know. And so I'm looking online at this church, like, I think I'm going to go here. And I'm looking at their pictures. I'm like, wait a second. That's our home. What is happening?
That is a bold outreach strategy right there.
Right?
We're going to set up camp in people's backyards and then hire them.
Yeah, and they used our faucet outside, like the swing set. Like they were just, oh, this is it. Okay.
That is divine intervention, maybe?
Right?
Like
That's great.
So then we started attending there. There was literally like, I think I went the second week they had opened. And so they, when you're a church plant and you open, you don't have it all together yet. You don't have all of the volunteers that you need to make a Sunday service function.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really know what you're doing half the time. You're just kind of winging it. And I loved it.
Yeah.
I was like, this is a hot mess. Oh, it was great.
I can help. Now, is this, I'm loving it because I live within a hot mess, or is this, I'm loving it because I can see how this comes together?
I can see how this comes together. That's always my thought process. Like, oh, I can help this. I love people so much, and I can engage with people and help people find their gifts, help people find their talents that God has provided, and help them feel confident in that, which is also why I have a degree in practical theology. I mean, how do you practically live out your faith day to day? So when I stepped in, I was like, what do you need? Let's do this. And so we were just fully on mission at that point, my family and I. So we were literally at the church, I think every day, forever and ever and ever. And so then that church planted. And so that came out of Fairhaven Church in Hudsonville. And then they decided to plant another church. And so I was a part of the planting team. And so we had to find all of the teams within the larger team to make it function. And I think I met and interviewed about 500 people during that process. Ooh. Yeah, it was a lot. And we helped launch that church plant in Jamestown. And then as I was in seminary, I just really felt this call to plant a church that looked a little bit different than the regular campuses. During this whole process, I had been a part of what's called 3DM, which is three-dimensional ministry, and I was a 3DM coach. And they really emphasized the table and gathering and eating at the table, and what does it look like to gather weekly and have predictable patterns, and having this safe space all the time. And so my family and I opened up our home once a week and publicly invited anyone to come and have dinner with us.
Come on.
And that we did that for several years. There were times where there was maybe 2 people that would show up. And then there were times when over 100 people would show up, and we're like, our house is not that big. But it worked, and it was fine.
We're having Cheerios tonight, guys.
It's okay.
Bags of chips. And all we would ask is that someone bring something to pass. And we really emphasize, like, it could be a 2-liter of pop. It could be a bag of chips. We don't care. It's not about the food itself. It's about what we're doing in the midst of each other. And so we did that for a long time. And so out of that was the inspiration to plant a house church. And so I also was very called to Wayland, Michigan at the time. And so we looked and looked and looked, and then God blessed us with a home that we could rent for really cheap. And so we made it a home for church. And so that's what we did. So I had my own home that I lived in, but then I would go to work at this home in Wayland. and invite people there and have the doors open all the time. And we had a washer and dryer, so families could do laundry if they didn't have that ability. And we had a vegetable garden, and we really truly just tried to do life with people in such a simplistic and tangible way. And so that was how we planted the church that I planted, and I was the lead pastor of for almost 2 years. Then COVID hit and really put a damper on everything. Yeah. And there were some political heat that was happening at that time, also during COVID. And so there were a number of things that led me to just back away for a minute. I was overwhelmed by, I guess, overwhelmed by people. People can be hurtful.
Yeah.
They really can. And so in the midst of that, I stepped back, and then my husband and I were really wrestling with what's next? What should I do? What should we do? What should our family do? And we were traveling to up north, Onaway, Michigan. That's where my grandparents lived at the time. And so I was just kind of...
My neck of the woods.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's where my parents are from. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we were driving up there, and I was kind of in a fog at that point. Like I think depression had set in because I loved what I did, but I didn't know how to do it next. And he said, Rachel, I really think we should move home. And I didn't even hesitate. I was like, yeah, I think you're right. That was it. So a couple months later, our house was sold, and we were moving up to Cadillac. And then things got real dark because I realized I don't have this network of people anymore. I got super lonely, even more depressed. It was like, I thought this was going to be the good thing, right? Like I thought, like, God, what are you doing? I don't understand. And so we live right by the White Pine Trail. And so I would get on that trail every single day, and I would run and just basically scream and yell at God because I was so angry. Like, I thought I was listening to you. What is happening? And then my mom ended up calling me and said, hey, there's this job opening at Love Inc. I think you'd be really good at it. And I was like, whatever, Mom. I'm just, sure, I'll look at it. And it was an intake specialist position where you answer the phones and take the intake of the client that needs assistance. I applied, and I did not hear anything for 6 weeks. And I was like, well, I guess they filled the position. And then out of the blue, I got a call from the previous director who said, I'm looking for an intake specialist. Are you still interested? And I said, yeah. At that point, I still didn't have a job. I still didn't know what I was doing, but I really love people. So this feels like a decent fit. So I did that for almost a year. And then that person retired. And then I ended up eventually filling the position I'm in now.
Wow. That's wild. So you were there during the interim period as well? I
stepped back for the summer. There was a situation that happened with one of the board members that was super inappropriate. And so I resigned on the spot that day for a while until I realized they are really struggling. And that board member was no longer a board member. He was also the interim director at the time.
Gotcha.
And so he was forced to resign all aspects of Love Inc. And so I felt safe at that point. Like, okay, I think I can come back and handle this.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's...
So you walked into a difficult position.
I did.
After a difficult time.
I did.
And a past that, I mean, it's not hard to see the pieces come together and the heart that God is calling you to. You know, we're going to open a home. We're going to open our home. Now we're going to open a home. Now we're going to pastor literally. But all of it seems to have the same draw to being the hands and feet of Christ, to being walking alongside people, a very discipleship-oriented ministry.
Very much so.
And then you become the executive director. So was that title intimidating? It's not lead pastors and like all the things you've done, but yeah.
Yes. And in fact, when it was offered at first, I truly did decline it.
Okay.
I that is not my realm. This is not my arena. I don't know anything about this job. Like, it's a lot of paperwork. That seems really boring. Mm-hmm. And it is.
Amen.
Yeah, right. It is. Let's be fair. But then I realized also that it's also a lot about people. Mm-hmm. And so I know that. I know how to do that. And so I eventually said yes. And here we are.
I can relate.
Ooh.
So interestingly, my role here, I started as youth pastor.
Okay.
And
Which is the coolest job
by the way,
in
yeah,
the world.
I don't care
Yeah.
what you're doing out there. It's not as cool as being a youth pastor. It's a place in which the most formative years of people's lives
Yeah.
are. They're actually still listening. They're obnoxious and they smell funny. They got energy and they're fun. But not to mention, free pizza and everything else.
Mhm.
But I loved that role. And then I got asked to step into a campus pastor role, which is what Isaac does now over in Cadillac, which he can relate a little bit to the church planning because planning a campus is pretty similar.
Yep.
We're still figuring it out.
Absolutely.
And will for
A while.
the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
But
We always said that you're still a baby until you hit the 5-year mark.
uh-huh.
Yeah. Well, it's funny too. People are like, "Oh, you've got 3 campuses. You guys must have it figured out." That's hilarious. I'm really glad you feel that way.
Here's the thing: we've learned what we don't have figured out.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
We've
that's
got a
blessing.
sizable chunk of mistakes under our belts and some more exciting ones to look forward
Amen.
to.
That's
But,
all right.
I get it.
But yeah, my current role involves kind of a lot of the policy paperwork, all those boring things that you mentioned. And I love how you said that because when it comes right down to it, it's all discipleship,
It is.
right? We got to do these things so that the programs flow and people can disciple, but it's all relational. It's all about the people. And some days it's easy to forget that in the midst of all the stuff.
It really is. I actually just took a 3-week vacation. I just got back last week because I needed that refuel. I had lost my vision of like, this is just mundane. I know myself enough to know I just needed a little bit of a break, just to center myself, to hear God's whisper in my ear and just take a beat. And it was exactly what I needed.
Mm-hmm.
Good for you. I think all too often people don't take the rest when they know they need it. But what does that look like for you? Just out of curiosity, was vacation look like for you?
So this is something that my family and I had planned for a while, but ended up being what it was. So we went to the Grand Canyon and Zion National Park and Bryce Canyon, and then we drove to San Diego, and I spent a week with my best friend.
Nice.
Yeah.
It seems
Also, shout out because we too retreat to the west.
Nice.
That's kind of our recharge place. So I'm getting pumped for where you just were.
My husband said, "So what do you want out of this? Like, what's your goal here?" And I said, "I want to feel like a tiny little ant.
Yeah.
I want to be reminded of how great God is and what He's capable of." And I got that feeling. I just stood among these giant mountainous formations, and I felt like a tiny little ant.
Mm-hmm.
Grand Canyon will do that to you.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I am thinking that we could easily just continue going down this road and talking through. I just kind of want to take the tangent of the Grand Canyon creationism right now, but that probably would be a hard turn.
Probably.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about what Love Inc. is? I'm familiar with it in 3 different forms now.
Okay.
We were involved with it at our Manistee location. The Traverse City location at one point was something that I had a connection to, but Cadillac has definitely been our partner for the longest haul. So yeah, tell us what it looks like. What is
Yeah.
it?
So essentially, we refer to ourselves as the scaffolding of need. So clients will either walk into our facility, which is a new thing this past year, or they call into our facility, which is generally how it's been for the past 30 plus years. They just call in, and the needs that they call in for are vast. People can call literally about anything and everything that they need, and it's our job to figure out how to solve that problem. So most of the time, we do get calls for utility bill payments, rent, mortgages, car repair, bus passes, gas cards. We've even had calls for like marriage licenses. Like, we can't pay for our marriage license, but we really want to get married. I'm like, oh, we got you. It's okay. Right. Birth certificates, you name it. We've heard it all, honestly. Clothing, furniture, housewares. And so from that call, we do what we call an intake, but I don't really like to refer to that to when we're speaking to clients. I don't like that word because it feels like business-like.
Yeah.
We're just having a conversation about how did you get here? And we only ask those questions because we want to understand the entire situation so we can best help you. Because you might be asking for help with a utility bill, but there's an underlying issue that we probably need to solve first. So that's what we try to accomplish with each conversation that we have with someone, which ultimately, hopefully, leads to a discipleship process that's connecting people to the local church and local businesses that have church members as their owners that can assist that way too. And so that's the goal.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've been fascinated by, so old school church would call this benevolence, right?
Yes.
Like every church had a benevolence fund. We're trying to help people that walk through the doors of our church. And frankly, most churches are really bad at it.
Yeah.
We don't have a good network. There are people that do take advantage of the system that are bouncing from church to church, just getting the gas cards or whatever else it is. And even when it is a genuine need, we oftentimes don't have the resources to be able to support beyond. And benevolence, kind of where it gets its biblical backing, is the idea that Jesus met the physical needs of people so that he could meet a deeper spiritual need.
Correct.
The churches try to do that. We kind of stink at the meeting the physical need part. We're just like, hey, let's just talk about Jesus. And sometimes we have, churches have been known to have weird rules in respect to it. Loving, this is what you guys do.
Yep.
And I always tell people, I'm like, hey, we could help you, but why don't you talk to my friends over at Loving? They have a better process for this. And you guys do a much better job than we do at identifying the real needs behind it, because it's what you do.
Thank you.
You know, it's interesting too, because we can talk benevolence all day long, but zoom out for a second and look at the missions of the church. I see, largely, we get really, really excited about evangelism. Like, what does it mean to bring the gospel to people so that they can give their yes to God? They would believe in Jesus as Lord and Savior. And when that piece of the puzzle happens, sometimes there's a spiritual and relational disconnect, right?
Yeah.
We got the yes. Celebrate, celebrate, celebrate.
I hope that goes well down
Good
the road.
luck,
Yeah.
right? Good
Right.
luck, yep.
Yeah.
Scripture doesn't say go and make believers.
Right.
Go and make disciples.
Yeah.
There's this intentional process where you're walking with people afterwards and you're developing relationships as you're pointing them to Jesus. And I see some of that coming from your testimony right now. That's, I think, the thing that really excites me is this is more than just meeting a need.
Yeah.
No, it's investing in a person and walking through those next steps of discipleship. And that is so pivotal and so often missed.
It really is. Yeah. So one of the cool things we did this year was create a community pantry. And it is connected to many of our pantry partners that like on their particular church location, they would have a certain pantry, like you all have the food pantry here. So we created this space. So all of these pantry things, so whether it's food, socks, underwear, hygiene products, baby things, whatever, it's all in one central location now. So if someone has multiple needs, which most people do, they don't have to go to all these different churches on different days at different times and have to remember all that. Because when you're in crisis mode, it's really difficult to remember all of these things, all these facts and dates and times. And so they can just come, get all of their needs met, and then we refer them to the church that's closest to them and tell the church, hey, could you call this person? This is the kind of situation that's happening. And then we just kind of, softly hand that person over and let the discipleship process form as it may.
Yeah, good.
I love that connection to the local church, because it's easy to miss. Some of our partners, former partners, other ministries, parachurch ministries, really struggle with the connection to the local church, and they become experts in a form of what they do.
Yes.
And just like I'm admitting, the church is not always well equipped for the benevolence piece. So we're glad to partner with you.
Yeah.
but the parachurch ministry might not be equipped for the discipleship piece,
Right.
which is kind of what the local church is supposed to do well.
Right.
Whether or not we always do or not, leave that up for grabs. But I'm always grateful for that, because you're right. When people are in the middle of a crisis, the last thing that they need is to try to keep the paperwork. They're living in their car and they're just trying to sort life out. And we're like, well, if you go here and call this number on this day at this time, maybe you'll meet a friendly person. But
Yeah.
I
It can be overwhelming.
go ahead.
I just want to back up for a second, because I see, again, with the mission, there's so many things that are worth celebrating here. And Rachel, I love hearing this piece of we're connecting and we're forming a relationship. We're speaking through whatever needs are present, but we're then handing off, Lord willing, part of the conversation to churches to enter into this discipleship process. Do you feel like that's a piece of the puzzle that's being met right now? Local churches walking along. This is maybe a little
Rolling the
question.
dice.
I don't know, dude.
Let's see how
I'm
she
sorry.
feels about it.
Genuinely, I'd like to know.
Yeah.
Do you feel like churches are receptive to that in this season, or is that a challenge? A loaded question.
No, that's okay. It's a fair question, and
Mhm.
my answer is, I think that churches want to.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're very good at it.
Okay.
And one of the reasons why we changed the model and have a community pantry is because when someone would in fact go to said pantry to get their socks and underwear, it would really just be a handoff. There would be no intentional conversation. And so coming from church background and pastoral leadership, I really thought a lot about how can we put the ball back in the church's court and make them responsible, hold them accountable to do the job that we're called to do as Big C Church. Right? So that was the intent that, okay, we have met the need. I'm going to tell you, church, this is what's happening. Now this is on you.
Mm-hmm.
You have a job to do.
Mm-hmm.
Well done.
That's the Enneagram 8 Challenger.
Bring it on. Come on.
Grateful for that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And I think the church needs to be challenged in that.
I do.
As a pastor of a local church,
Yeah.
I am grateful for organizations that say, hey, listen, you said you were here to disciple people, to draw them nearer to Christ. We handled the busy work. I do all the paperwork that's boring so that you guys can do this. But now we're going to need you to step in. And I'll admit, one of our desires here at the Tabernacle is to partner well with our ministry partners. And we know we don't always do it. In the last couple of years, we've been pushing to do more of this, have conversations, know our ministry partners well, figure out how to do it better. Because what we don't want to do is go, well, our people tithe, and then we write a check, and that's how we partner. Now, that's part of it. That is one of the things God calls us to do, is to give joyfully and to do that. There are some that is their call.
Mm-hmm.
But as a local church, we also want to come alongside, work with you guys, learn from, because I'll tell you right now, there's plenty that the Tabernacle can learn from your testimony, how you're working, and the way in which you guys are reaching people. Our pantry is beautiful. I think it's one of the greatest things that we do, and we do it very differently than most pantries do.
Yeah.
But I also know that the pantry has never been anything other than a opportunity to be able to reach people with Christ.
Right.
Now, how do we do that well? Well, the tactics have to change from time to time, and we do have to learn. So I'm excited to get you in a conversation with Carrie Aitken, our pantry coordinator, at some point, and just go, hey, how are you guys doing it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the vision and the mission, the idea, the big picture behind what you do is amazing. But how you are actually doing it, I'm just kind of interested to get into kind of some of the services that you guys provide. So I know that some of the other organizations did things like financial classes, all kinds of different specific services. For those listeners that are like, hey, sounds great. I know a person, this might be a good connection point. Can you tell us kind of about the services and the way you connect with the clients other than them just walking through the door?
Yeah, so that's actually a really intriguing discussion, because over the past several years, we called it transformational ministry. That's a mouthful. And it was TM for short.
Yeah.
Good choice.
But there was a name for it. They called it Higher Ground. And I think for a long time it worked well. So in Higher Ground, they would have classes in early fall and then again in early spring, where for a season there were things like budgeting classes, parenting classes, nutrition classes, all sorts of cool learning opportunities. Over the course of several years, however, it was the same people coming over and over and over again. And then the classes kind of shifted to, we're going to make a craft as our class. But there's nothing wrong with that, right? Those are cool, fun classes, but also that's not the vision and mission of Love Inc. And so I had many conversations with our board about what do we do? How do we fix this? And so we ended up just stopping all of it. And we are relaunching and rebranding our transformational ministry programming, and it's called Spot On. And that's because we have the Ink Spot in Reed City, which is our resale store, and we just kind of played off of that word spot. And so Spot On classes will be launching, but it takes time, vision, and grace in order to do that. It's kind of like a church plant of sorts. You know, you have to have all the people in place in order for things to roll. So what we're doing right now is one Saturday a month, we're having some sort of informational class on site in Cadillac. We also realized that there is giant need in Osceola County. And so instead of hosting classes, we're actually doing one-on-one interviews with our clients, trying to really understand the need. Maybe a parenting class isn't what people need right now. Maybe that's 6 months from now or a year from now. Maybe what they really need is just to feel like someone cares. So that's what we're doing. We're just investing in people's lives first, and then figuring out, okay, maybe this class is what the majority of our clients need at this time, so then we'll be launching that. So we're still in the baby stages of this whole programming because we want to do it right.
That's awesome. I appreciate that. It's easy to see a perceived need, attack it, and recognize later. And I'll throw us under the bus on this. So in the early days of the quarantine that we try to avoid talking about, we immediately panicked, right? As a church, as a community, as people, we're like, what do we do? And the church, just wanting to be the church to the people around us, we're like, well, there's going to be a bunch of kids that don't get lunch at school because they just got out of school. So we got a bunch of hot dogs and hamburgers, and we sat out in the road, and we cooked for kids that weren't coming, and that other people had thought through a little bit better and provided. The school actually ended up supporting. We were able to support the school a little bit in that, just volunteering with dropping meals off to kids. But our immediate reaction was, let's just fill this need. And the need wasn't what we thought the need was.
We often make the need about ourselves. You come to me, and then I'll serve you, and I'll feel really good, right? Like that's, we constantly do that. The lens has to be switched. We have to think, I need to go there. Jesus walked his way through the Gospels. We also need to walk our way through our communities.
Yes. I love that. Yeah. I just got to have a conversation with a local business person that came, and there is, so in our community, very, very small population, just around 700, we have a food pantry, and I'll brag on that a million times over. It's the best food pantry. It's the best grocery store in the area.
I would agree, actually. I mean, we rave about your food pantry.
It's awesome. I didn't even know if you're familiar with it. But we also have another cooler that another group uses to feed local families. And then there was this request to have another thing outside of the pantry where people could come and pick up food. And I had the conversation, and I felt pretty heartless saying, I don't know if the need is what we think it is. Because when those families come to our pantry, we give a significant amount of food. If they need instant food, there is this here. Why would we do another thing? And he looked at me and he goes, that's a good point. Well, I'm not trying to be heartless here, but why put a bunch of stuff out by the road that somebody can come up and they can be fed for a day,
an
hour, whatever it may be, when there's no connection point, no relationship?
So, Rachel, you had spoken a couple of times now to just various needs within communities and looking specifically at some of the mission behind needs in Osceola County. It's wonderful, wonderful that Love Inc. has identified those things and is willing to step into them. But I would imagine that needs don't go away with the efforts of just one organization. You know, Scripture says we equip the saints
Right.
to do the work of the ministry. I think that applies to us at all times, whether you're a nonprofit, church, parachurch. We have to do our best to cast vision and bring people into that to help with meeting needs. Are there ways that can be done right now? Are there ways that people can, in this community, can walk alongside you to share in the load and to tackle some of the needs? Anything you can speak to there?
Yes, absolutely. So we thrive on volunteerism.
Yeah.
And so we always need volunteers to help run the community pantry, which isn't just a food pantry, it's all the above. We need people every single day to run that, and we actually don't have that right now.
Mm-hmm.
We only have volunteers a couple days a week that have said yes to that. We also need volunteers who answer phones. That first contact is a phone call and or somebody that walks in and sees that receptionist sitting at that front desk. We need people that have this heart to serve and with gentleness and kindness and with no biases, really. Because we see it all and hear it all and smell it all. And that's okay, right? Like we're looking for those type of volunteers. And we also need volunteers who are willing to pick up donations. So we get a lot of calls, which is amazing, of people that said, hey, I have this dresser, or I have this couch, or I have this gently used bed. Do you want it? Absolutely. 90% of the time, it's either our store manager in Reed City that's driving all over to pick up something with her truck and trailer, or it's my husband and I, because we can't find volunteers that are willing to do that. Which is fine, but if we had specific volunteers, that would take a load off our shoulders for sure.
Yeah, that's huge. So to the listeners that are going, oh yeah, they need volunteers. She's actually talking to you, especially those that live over in the Cadillac area.
Yep.
They're located on Sunnyside Drive. They're the building with the 3 crosses. Knock on the door, ask for Rachel, introduce yourself, and bring your trailer, because there's a lot that needs to be picked up. And I don't say that callously. I think sometimes we forget that my desire as a pastor is that my congregation is serving outside of the 4 walls of our church. Now, don't get me wrong. We need nursery workers.
Right.
Please get in there.
I'm literally begging you.
Yes. But we also need to be outside of our 4 walls, engaging our community. That's where evangelism happens. That's where showing our hands and feet as like Jesus with flesh on happens. And you get some cool opportunities. You mentioned like, hey, we've seen it all, we've smelled it all. It's tough. That is life-changing.
Right.
More than anything else I've done in my life, when I have been face-to-face with others that are in need, it is not them that I am helping. It is me that I am realizing, like, I'm looking in the mirror and recognizing how blessed I am. I'm realizing what God has allowed me to do. I learn so much because those that depend on Christ for everything, they have a different type of faith than I do. And I promise you, you get involved, you get plugged in at a place like Love Inc., you're working at the community pantry, and you're loving on people, it will be a place in which you find Christ in a whole new way. So step into that, please.
Yeah. Rachel, what is the process for somebody that wants to step into that? If they have a desire to volunteer, is that as simple as making a phone call and starting that conversation?
Yep. We just do a simple background check to make sure that you're a safe person.
Yep.
And you probably are, listener. And so from there, then we just I have a conversation with that person to say, what is your desire? What is your gift? What are your gifts? And where would you like to serve? And then we try to put people in the places that bring joy, because this work can be heavy. And so it's really important for you to be in a place that does bring you joy, that you excel at, so that you don't get burnt out.
Yeah.
Man, I love that. And background checks, just like we run, for those with a background like mine, which is not spotless by a long shot,
Mhm.
the reality is that begins a conversation for
Yep,
us.
absolutely.
Is that the same for you guys?
Same,
Yeah.
yep. And so if it looks a little lengthy, that's totally fine. We just then put you in a place that you can thrive.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Amen. Good.
Awesome. Well, thank you for giving our people the opportunity to partner with you, because if it is my church partners with and not I partner with, there's a distinction between you and your church, and that's not a healthy place to be. So, Rachel, I'd be interested with some of the time that we have left.
Yeah.
Conceptual mission, vision, ideas, even the services and how people connect are one thing, but for most of our listeners, they thrive on the stories. Like the reason why we wanted to get to know you a little bit is because now they have a picture in their head. Now, hopefully they're watching YouTube and they actually have a picture. Like they know who you are now, and they'll make friends and get to know you. But can you share with us maybe some things that are going on at Love Inc. recently? Maybe some of the stories along the way. I think that brings life to it a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So I will leave the names out for confidentiality reasons, because, you probably know some of these people, and that's okay. So just recently we had a young mother that has 4 little kids call in, and she said, my power just got turned off. Is there any way you can help? We dug deeper and realized that the power bill itself was like $3,000, which is a huge bill to pay. Her husband is incarcerated, and he won't be out for a while. And there were just lots of layers to her story that just seemed devastating, and the sound of her voice was like just desperation, pleading, will someone pay attention to me? Will someone listen to me? I'm drowning here. And so we ended up doing a whole conversation about what is your income? What are your expenses? And the reality is, for many people that we serve, we can budget all we want, but if you're not making enough money and to pay your bills, the point is moot. Right? So then that's when we start reaching out to our partners saying, this girl needs you. We need to rally around this family and support them. And so we did that. We're getting her consumers back on. We have a mentorship now with one of our intake specialists where each week they're going to check in to see, has she done the things that they talked about the week before to stay on track? We gave her opportunities to get a better job, to maybe make some more money so that she can provide for her family. Gave her daycare options and how to pay for that, which actually are working out. So yeah, it's a holistic type of, but all she wanted was her bill to be paid, right? Like, so we uncovered a whole story of what's happening. And then to be able to provide like all of her school needs for a couple of her kids are going to be going to school, and making sure they have backpacks and shoes and all of the things that go in the backpack, right? And just all these tangible things that many of us take for granted every single day, because why wouldn't you just go to Walmart and grab a few pads of paper? Well, some people can't.
Right.
They literally can't. And so it's our job to recognize that and fill that gap as best we can.
It's amazing. Behind every unpaid bill, every intake, is an entire life, multiple.
Yeah. And here's the thing that we try to help our partners understand is, because we often hear, well, they did something to get into this mess, and there's this jaded kind of connotation of like, well, they get what they pay for, they deserve it. And it's like, no, not necessarily. Sometimes life stinks and you're not ready for it. Things happen and you're not prepared. All of us have been in that space at one point or another.
Yes.
And some people are brave enough to ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
And quite frankly, for those that have done it to themselves, so did we.
Right.
And
So
yet
did we.
Christ died for me.
Yeah.
I did it all to myself, every one of my mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this thing called grace that bled from my Savior's hands, and I am grateful for it. And it's hard. It is hard, though. I don't want to discredit those that feel that way, because I understand that
Absolutely.
inclination
Yeah.
of, man, I've just seen it so many times, and there are those that take advantage of the system, and there is brokenness within the system that can be taken advantage of. And it's hard to watch people. A guy told me recently, he's like, when your pantry's open, there's an awful lot of $70,000 trucks out there picking up food. And I laughed and I said, Yep. Shysters need Jesus too.
That's right.
And all along the way, we get cool opportunities to just engage here. I'm grateful that that's the heart that you guys have. You can't survive this type of thing without that perspective. You just can't.
And we have an amazing staff too. That everyone in that building just exudes Christ love. And they're sometimes I think they have way more grace than I do for people. Just the way they handle day-to-day scenarios, and I'm just always blown away by how they serve, and I'm constantly learning from them. I just had a conversation with one of our intake specialists, Paul, this morning about so I always try really hard to fill the room with people that are much smarter than me, because I get to learn from them, I get to grow from them, and then I'm not held responsible because I'm not the smartest person in the room.
It's exactly how I feel right now, by the way. It's like, this works.
But I think that's how I feel often in that space. Like, they're just really, really good at their job. Yeah. And every day I'm learning something, and like, oh, you said that so beautifully. That makes a lot of sense. And, just I try to capture something every day and try to grow and listen to what God is saying. And yeah, it's an adventure I never thought I'd be on.
Mm-hmm. You're also much more gracious than I am. Usually it's, for me, you said that so beautifully. I'm going to steal it and not give you credit. That happens a lot around here.
That's
fair.
I don't remember who said this. It was probably me.
Yeah. Legitimate preachers,
but no,
right?
That's so awesome, too, when you have a team surrounding you that is gifted in the way that they are and builds you up in the process.
Yeah.
Everybody wins, and ministry happens in that space.
Absolutely.
Yeah, shout out Love Inc. staff. We love you. We're grateful for you because you apparently made it so she could come hang out with us today. So we're grateful for that piece, if nothing else.
Yep.
So on that note, are there stories that don't turn out so well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, those aren't the fun ones to tell, right? So there is a client of ours that lives in this area, and he has multiple bills through circumstances that are super unfortunate. He has a mortgage that's super behind, that will probably default soon. He has electric and gas bills that are far behind, and those will be shut off soon. And here's the reality. So we often have our clients first call DHHS and fill out a state emergency relief forms so that they can hopefully get state emergency relief funding, which is enough to usually pay for a defaulted mortgage or a really high balance of a bill. All of that funding is gone. There is no more funding available until the end of the year. So, and we're a tiny nonprofit. We have resource, but we don't have that much resource.
Right.
So we have people like this gentleman who has literally thousands of dollars that he needs to come up with in order to keep his home and keep his family in his home. And he's probably going to lose his home, which those are the stories that we have to wrestle with, that stink. And he's not the only one. Right. There's so many people that have that same story that they call too late. If you'd have just called when you first had an issue, we probably could have solved the problem. But now you're so far in the hole because of pride or shame or whatever it was that prevented you from making that call, now we're in a pickle, right?
Yeah.
And it's so heartbreaking to us because we could throw, a couple $100 at this, but what good is that going to do?
Doesn't sound like much.
Right.
The fact is the need is always going to be greater than our ability to.
Yeah.
And to be that guy, it is never going to be bigger than God can handle.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that we can get the bills paid and the mortgage sorted out. And I love that you are honest about it, though. Sometimes it comes down to, why didn't you call earlier? And it's not a blame. It's not to make anybody feel bad. It's for those of us that struggle with pride, maybe myself foremost.
I'm right there with you.
I'm nodding in agreement, not judgment.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure.
So
I'm good
that's
either
what
way.
that is.
Both are legit. But we find ourselves unwilling to ask for help.
Yeah.
And it's not just finances. I mean, the church is full of people unwilling to ask for help in all kinds of areas. But this one specifically, I asked the question of, are there stories that don't end so well? Because one, the need is great. And I want our listeners to hear the opportunity that, hey, supporting Love Inc. Gives them the opportunity to reach a little bit further down into this great need. But at the same time, for those that are listening, they're like, hey, maybe I've only missed one bill. I think I can get this back together. It's not giving up.
Right.
It is asking for help
Right.
and do it early because there is beauty in being able to, and there is strength in our weakness.
Absolutely. And here's the other piece that I'll add on to there. Sometimes we're just very frank and say, like, I'm really sorry. This is way out of our scope of assistance, but here's what we can do. We are going to consistently pray for you and over you. And anytime you're having this anxiety-ridden thought process of how am I going to manage, you call us. We're not professional therapists, but we're really good listeners. And we can give you hope. We can encourage you. And we can tell you, like, hey, we've made mistakes too. And I know this stinks. I know the situation that you're in feels unbearable. But let me tell you about my Jesus.
Yeah.
Because he has been in some unbearable situations and given us hope through those. And so, yeah, we have those conversations often more than I'd really like to admit. But that's the reality too, that sometimes it's just walking people through their darkness until they're able to see a glimmer of light.
Hope is quite a gift and quite reality. Jesus didn't heal everybody while he was on earth.
Right. He didn't. And I think that a Western culture often likes to, for lack of a better term, put glitter on turds.
By the way, this is a
Amen
Tabernacle
and
podcast.
Yeah.
That's
Worse
totally
has
reasonable.
been said.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very true. So do you feel like, I'm getting excited right now, just hearing your heart and your willingness to have those conversations. Sometimes in the midst of hopelessness, literally the only answer that we have, and the only answer we should have, is Jesus.
Right.
Is the hope of the gospel.
Yeah.
Do you see fruit from those conversations? Does it reach people? And
We don't really get to see that on our side.
Yeah.
That's the hard part.
Mhm.
We do have conversations, multiple conversations, but we are the people that people call when they're in crisis. We are not the people that people call when they're having a good day and they found Jesus or whatever it is. Like, we are just not those people. That is why it's so important for us to have those outlets of rejuvenation and spiritual connectedness, and because we don't get to know. It's not our job.
Yeah.
That's just us being selfish then at that point, wanting to know. It's not our job.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Amen. Okay.
That's a great question, though, because I wondered the same thing. Like, does God ever throw you a bone and you get somebody that calls up 10 years later and just says, hey, thanks. I finally got on my feet.
I do have one story.
Yeah?
And I've clung to
Bring it.
this for the 3.5 years that I've been at Love Inc. So it was right when I first started. This gentleman called, and he was actually, I believe, from Buckley, believe it or not. He had pancreatic cancer. He had never married. He did not have any children. He had served for the government for his whole career. He had traveled all over the world, and so he was pretty well off, but good enough, right? He called because he had spent his entire savings on cancer, like getting the treatments and the hospital bills. And he's like, I've had this for a while now, and I've exhausted all of my resource. And he's like, I really hate calling, but I do have a late consumer's bill. It was $38.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, we got you. That's fine. And I prayed over him for him to have some peace and for the pain to be relieved, because the reality was it wasn't going away.
Right.
And so I did that. And then the next day, I came into the office, and we always have voicemails that people call overnight, and we have to call them back. On the voicemail was this man, and he was weeping. I mean, just sobbing. He could hardly get the words out. And he's like, hey, I just wanted you to know that your kindness was overwhelming to me. And it's because of you that I think I understand this whole Christianity thing. I'm like, I just had a half-hour conversation, right? And I'm crying.
Yeah.
Holding the receiver to my ear, listening to this. And he said, I promise you, every time I drive by your office, I will say a prayer for you. I held on to that voicemail for a long time. So when I was having a bad day, I would just listen to it and be reminded, okay, this is the work. Okay, this is the work. I one day got a phone call from a man then. I was the director now, so this is a couple years later. And he said, hey, do you remember so-and-so? And I was like, yes. How is he? And he goes, well, unfortunately, he passed. But I am his best friend, and I just need you to know that you literally changed his life. Mm-hmm. He pivoted, did a 180, and he knew Jesus because of you. And I just sat there and cried.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, and he's like, it's not much, but he's leaving Love Inc. everything that he had. And that was just so beautiful. I mean, just that to me was just this, I don't know, just a gift. We don't get those.
Mm-hmm.
We don't get those, but
Praise God.
yeah.
You need them, though. Like,
Yeah.
I understand why you held on to them.
Yeah.
Because sometimes in this world of ministry, the heavy of the next burden, the challenge, what's broken,
Mm-hmm.
it's more than we can bear. And God's going, I get it. And I want you to cling to me. But for right now,
Right.
I'm just going to throw you a bone.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for those. I got one this last week, and I'm just so grateful.
Yes.
To just keep you going.
Yep,
Mm-hmm.
they really do.
Oh, awesome. Rachel, unfortunately, you have a real job, and eventually we do have to let you go back to it. I would love to be able to further this conversation maybe another time, and whatever that looks like. Maybe we get the complete changed life story, or maybe we get to have your husband on with you and get to meet him. So one question I've been dying to ask the whole time, what is he doing along the way? Like, does he work for a living, and what is he doing? Because I'm picking up pieces that you guys are doing these things together, but it sounds like he might also be doing something else.
He does.
Yeah.
So he is the GM of a landscape and snow removal company in the greater Grand Rapids and Kalamazoo area.
Okay.
And he's done that for ever.
Okay.
So he started as a part-time shoveler in the wintertime. And then worked his way up, and now he's the GM of the company. It's called Sneller Snow and Grounds.
Sneller.
Yeah,
Snow and Grounds.
That's the last name of the business owner.
I like
Right
it.
on.
Yeah. And so he has had this flexibility where he can work from home a couple of days a week, but then also travel a couple of days a week. And his home office is actually in the Love Inc. building.
Yeah.
So they rent out a little office space in there, so I get to work side by side with my husband a few days a week, which is pretty solid.
That's
What a
pretty
gift.
awesome right there.
Yeah, it
That's
is.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, hey, before we wrap things up, how can our people get a hold of you? I mean, I threw out Sunnyside Drive, but are you guys on socials? Are you on socials? Tell us how people can connect with you.
Absolutely, yeah. We do have a Facebook page and an Instagram page. It's Love Inc. Wexford Osceola.
Mm-hmm.
And you can give us a call. Our phone number is 231-779-1888. I also have a Facebook and Instagram page, my personal one. They can friend me there, Rachel Reinink. Yeah, we would love to have anyone get a hold of us and step into our crazy, messy, awesome ministry that we have going.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, Rachel, thanks so much just for taking time to share your heart and to share ministry today. I got to tell you, I want to revert back for just a second because I see such a clear calling to ministry for you personally. And I think the thing that got me most pumped today, even in the midst of brokenness and even in the midst of pain, you were obedient to a very clear calling from the Lord. And it was in brokenness that you gave God your yes. Thank you, because that's a testimony to so many people. And I know that God used that and is still using that. So appreciate your heart and just the life that you're living right now in the ministry that God's working through.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a wild ride, but would I change some of it? Absolutely. I think anyone who says I wouldn't change it for the world, they're liars.
Fibbing.
You're so full of crap.
That part sucked. I would rather
not do that again.
I have like those moments are maybe even once a week sometimes for me. Like it's allowed to suck for a little bit.
I already mentioned my criminal history. I'd rather not have to explain that on every podcast. That's
right.
Inconvenient to say the least.
It makes every podcast a little more interesting too.
I just wonder how many times I get people to go back to my changed life story just so they can be like, so literally what is the... Yeah, I'm not telling you. You got to go back and listen to the whole long episode. So awesome. Well, Rachel, thank you so much again just for this opportunity. It's a blessing to be able to get to hear people's heart and where God is leading them and what they're doing. Tab family, like, subscribe, share this episode. If for no other reason there is somebody within your circle that needs the services or needs to support Love Inc., and this is how you do that. You share it, you tell them, and you give them your own little testimony of why this mattered. I just listened to one of our former podcasts today, and I'm just like, I got to share this. It was so good. That's what this is all about. We don't really care how many people see me and Isaac's shiny heads. We just want people to know what Rachel's doing over there and get the opportunity to be a part of that or take advantage of the services that Love Inc. has.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for having me. This was really fun.
Yeah. Well, this is Martin, Isaac, and Rachel signing out. Thanks, Matthew.